As far as Famicom and NES shooting games go, few developers out there had as high a level of finesse on the system as Konami, with several shooting games appearing on the platform, including notable fan favorites such as Life Force, Contra, Gradius, and many more with super high amounts of polish. It's no wonder that Konami not only circumvented early Nintendo of America quality control limits with its Ultra brand, but also cemented its presence in the gaming and shooting landscape, even today.
Despite this, there were quite a few Konami titles that sort of went MIA in North America. Most of the Twinbee series, Gradius 2, Parodius Da, and Konami YY World are notable exclusions, but the real standout, especially from a shooting game perspective, was Crisis Force, released on the Famicom in 1991. In many ways, Crisis Force is an Apex Famicom shooter with some truly amazing technical innovation, not to mention some fantastic gameplay. Let's take a closer look.
Konami sure did know how to get the most out of the Famicom and NES, and this shows fundamentally in the controls of Crisis Force. While the Famicom controller only has 2 face buttons outside of Start and Select, clever use of them allows for more functions to be used. Unlike several other games that do this, even in games as great as Magical Chase on the PC Engine, in which the control scheme was a little cluttered and a bit clunky, it all feels very intuitive and natural in Crisis Force.
Movement is 8-way as usual. Speed pickups will make your craft swifter, yet your base speed is still quite adequate if you happen to die. The maximum speed is also a rate that never feels too fast for what you need to do. Meanwhile, your fire is mapped to the B button, and pressing the A button while firing will unleash a bomb attack which, while local, is handy in a pinch no matter where it's used.
The fun really starts when you press the A button on its own. Doing so will change the form of your ship, cycling through 3 different variants with unique weapons. All fire is rapid in Crisis Force, but there are shot and laser variants for each of your ship's 3 forms. Blue pickups will change the shots to bullets and will grow in power up to level 4 with subsequent blue pickups. Red pickups do the same but change the shot types to laser.
The standard fighter has concentrated forward bullet shots and a helix pattern laser. The second form fires bullets forward and backward with an emphasis on rear fire, and its laser creates a rolling shield. The third final form fires bullets forward, left, and right, while the laser attack will fire sideways and track your enemies while firing bullets forward.
Getting hit in Crisis Force reduces your shots to level 1, and if the player is hit again, it's 1 life down. While this may sound especially forgiving, there's an awful lot going on, starting especially in Stage 3, so this is a welcome feature.
The bomb attacks also differ according to what ship a player is using as well. The standard fighter has an expanding ring-style bomb that clears enemies in shots as it gets bigger. The second form launches a black hole bomb that sucks in enemies and their bullets, and the third variant is a teleport ability that damages enemies during its phase-out and phase-in cycles.
Using these 3 forms is critical at specific parts of the game, though the first and third forms are arguably the best to use for the whole game on average. You'll also be picking up small blue crystals throughout the game as well. As soon as 5 are collected, your ship will change, or merge in 2-player co-op, into a Nazca-style bird with some seriously ridiculous firepower. When this form is enabled, a counter starting at 99 counts down to the corner of the screen.
In 2-player co-op, the player that collects 5 first will gain control, but both players fire unique shots. Player 1 gets forward firing, while Player 2 gets spread shots. Getting hit in this form will decrease the counter in the bottom corner of the screen by 10. When it reaches 0, you change back to normal. Any pickups collected add to your firepower.
All in all, the gameplay here is some of the most solid you'll find on the Famicom, with very few games exceeding it on the control front. But it's not without its problems. The biggest problem here is the slowdown that you'll encounter, especially in 2-player co-op. Crisis Force is a pretty ambitious game, both visually and technically, so it's no real surprise that with so much going on in the background and with all the enemies, shots, and players' insane firepower that things can sometimes slow to a crawl.
All in all though, the gameplay in Crisis Force is just fantastic, with all kinds of nifty control features and game elements that really make you feel like a badass throughout the whole game. But what about its scoring?
Crisis Force doesn't have much in the line of scoring, unfortunately. While in-game, there's no real indication of your score or if there are any real boosts if you take out chains or collect specific items. However, your tally is still shown at the end of each stage, post-boss.
Given that, more or less, all you're doing is getting points for blowing stuff up, Crisis Force loses a bit of replayability as a result. Despite this, points go towards a rather generous extend score, which, of course, leads to getting through the game easier.
complementing its strong gameplay, Crisis Force also has a very strong presentation in most respects. It's also in full English, which makes its lack of presence in the West a little more than baffling, especially with the presence of Gradius, Lifeforce, Stinger, and Jackal.
Perhaps Crisis Force's greatest presentation attribute is its visuals. With all kinds of multi-layered scrolling and some really cool mechanical and level designs, there's never a visually dull moment throughout the game. It might just be a bit too much though, since, especially in two-player co-op, there's quite a bit of the old slowdown.
Sound-wise, Crisis Force has some really snazzy music that's fitting and catchy the whole way through. Some of the stage BGM selections are reused though, which sort of takes away from the later stages' personality a bit. The sound effects in Crisis Force are also present in a great many other Konami games. Laser sounds from Gradius, metal clangs from Ninja Turtles 2, and more will be instantly recognizable, despite fitting the bill rather well.
So, Crisis Force not only plays pretty great, it also looks and sounds fairly boss as well. But how does it stack up? Let's take a look.
Crisis Force is sharp and responsive, even after dying with full speed pickups. No Gradius syndrome here.
The controls here are pretty smooth, and the mode change is intuitive.
With multiple difficulty levels and multiple endings depending on how hard you make the game, there's plenty of challenge here.
The first stages were pretty easy, but ramped up really quickly around the midpoint.
Crisis Force is quite long with 7 stages, and there's plenty of replay to get that best ending on hard.
At 7 stages, this game is a decent length, but the slowdown in co-op play makes them drag.
Crisis Force has some truly fantastic visuals with all sorts of awesome special effects and parallax. Unfortunately, the game will slow down with 100% certainty as a result.
The graphics in Crisis Force are quite impressive, given the system they're on, with detailed, deeply multi-layer scrolling.
The BGM in Crisis Force is pretty badass with a full OST of great tunage. Fans of Konami's work on the NES and Famicom will recognize a lot of the sound effects here as well.
The stages could have used a few more tracks, but what's here works very well.
With its on-the-fly mode change system that gives players the means and power to take on all comers, Crisis Force shows that Konami was still able to heavily innovate straight through the Famicom's entire life cycle.
The mode changes different attacks was a pretty great feature, and the 2-player combined mode was a neat twist on Capcom's original sidearms idea.
Crisis Force has some seriously great gameplay behind it, which makes it all the more unfortunate that more people hadn't been able to enjoy this game around the world when it was originally released. Despite this, it has grown quite the reputation over the decades since it was unleashed onto the 8-bit landscape, and it is well worthy of its hype. Crisis Force gets a 4.5 out of 5. Getting a copy of Crisis Force is going to be pretty pricey no matter how you go about it. Card-only copies are rarely less than $60 at auction with the exception of bootleg carts, which you should be wary of. Complete copies consistently go for well over $120 as well. With careful bidding and shopping though, obtaining one for a decent price is still more than doable.